So, Ngākari Ngāngi, everyone. Welcome to the Riverland Academy of Clinical Excellence Grand Round. It's great to be partnering with you as we have the opportunity to hear from experts from around the world and from our own country and have our ideas challenged, our thoughts expanded, and an opportunity to improve the care in rural South Australia. Everyone will know that aged care is a huge issue for Australia. It's a huge issue for the world. And being able to define what we mean by quality in aged care is clearly a really important factor. We are very fortunate today to have Julie Ratcliffe, a Matthew Flinders Fellow and Professor of Health Economics in the College of Nursing and Health Sciences at Flinders University, to help us. She also holds honorary professional positions in the Institute of Health and Wellbeing at the University of Glasgow and the School of Health and Related Research at the University of Sheffield. But importantly for today, she's been engaged by the Commonwealth Government to help us understand what we mean by quality in aged care, and particularly to work with consumers to develop indicators. Welcome, Professor Julie Ratcliffe.
Thank you, Paul, and thanks very much for the invitation. I'd just like to start by acknowledging the Kaurna people, the traditional owners of the land on which I'm speaking to you from today, and to acknowledge their elders past, present and emerging. So I'm just going to attempt to share my screen. The right screen would be helpful. Can you see that, guys? Can you see? And
we can only see you at the moment.
Oh, you can only see me. So I didn't do very well there, did I? Sorry. Hopefully. Still, I can only see me. Yeah. Come on. Hang on. Let's try and do this properly. Okay. How about that one? That looks better, I think. Is that right?
That looks perfect. Yes, okay, we can see your whole computer with all the slides.
Okay, great. So now you can see just the first slide. Is that correct?
And all the little slides on the side. Yes.
Oh, you can still see those. Oh.
Yes.
Why can you see those?
So if you go down to presentation bottom right, I reckon you'll be exactly right. That's the one, just down there.
Sorry, guys, I'm struggling a bit.
Julie, it's Anne here. You might need to enable your editing. And then do your slide.
Oh, sorry. Yes. Okay.
That's good problem solving. Thanks, Anne.
Is that better? Can you see in slide view now?
Perfect.
Is that okay?
That's fantastic.
Excellent. Sorry about that, guys.
Welcome again. That's great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Julie.
Okay, so thank you for the kind introduction. So yes, I'm going to be talking about essentially a 4-year programme of work that we've recently completed, where we partnered with older people and also with family carers to develop new measures of quality of life and quality of care experience for person-centred quality assessment in aged care. Okay, so we can sort of go back in time a little bit, fairly recently to September 2019, which is when we were really in the early stages of this programme of work. And at that time, I did a Google News search, and essentially these are the sorts of headlines that I'm sure you're all very familiar with and you can recall that were coming up at that time. So it was really at the start of the Royal Commission into aged care in Australia, and we had a lot of, very shocking headlines about maltreatment and abuse of older aged care residents. And I'd just like to say that I have worked with a lot of really excellent aged care providers, as I'm sure you're also very well aware of some excellent aged care providers in the sector. So these are really the unfortunate tail end that were really making the headlines at the time, but they're obviously very, very shocking incidences of poor quality care that we really need to address moving forward. So in terms of the key recommendations for the Royal Commission, there was a plea for more economic evaluation evidence. So I'm a health economist. I've done a lot of work focusing on the cost effectiveness of new healthcare technologies, new services, new models of care in the health system. There's far less work being undertaken historically in the aged care system that would be equivalent in terms of looking at the cost effectiveness of new models of care, treatments and services, etc. So we do need more of that work moving forward. And also the Royal Commission recommended quality of life, comprehensive quality of life assessment across Australia's aged care sector as a new quality indicator for the system. Okay, so in terms of where we're moving with the Department of Health and Aged Care and the reforms of the sector following the Royal Commission, we're moving effectively towards a sort of star rating system for all aged care providers. And this information here is information that I've pulled up, which is publicly available in the UK. So they have not effectively a star rating system, but they have a kind of a traffic light system, of grading of residential care homes according to the quality of care that they administer. And quality of life is a key indicator that feeds into these quality indicators in the UK system. So the person in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen is a person who's very dear to me. That's my mother. She's currently 80 years of age, but she's been told by a GP that she has very good very good kind of health ratings. She's just had a sort of 80-year check over, and the GP said, I wouldn't be surprised if you live to be 100, which was a bit of a shock to my mum. But of course, if she does live to be 100, there is a good chance that she will need to receive care and support from aged care services, and she may well need to enter a residential care facility at some stage in her life. And this is the sort of information that that she and myself as a family member can pull up in the UK about the quality of aged care homes. And this is just the front cover. Essentially, you can dig into these statistics and get a lot more information on each care home. And this is, I think, the way that we're moving now in Australia, which I think is a very good thing. So we developed new quality of life and quality of care experience tools. They were co-created with older Australians in both home and residential care settings. And we developed our new tools essentially for application in quality assessment, but also in economic evaluation, because as a health economist, I'm very keen to ensure that we have more economic evaluation evidence about the cost effectiveness of new models of care and service innovations in aged care moving forward. And in order to do that, we effectively measure effectiveness in terms of the quality of life. So we survey older people and we ask them about the quality of life benefits of new innovations in aged care. And that's how we determine the cost effectiveness essentially moving forward. So the tools that were developed are a perfect complement to Interi, which some of you may be familiar with, which is a very comprehensive quality assessment system that's used in many countries internationally, including in New Zealand. ROSA, which is the SAMRI register for older senior Australians. ACOM and all other quality indicators. And essentially the aim of our work is to place the measurement and valuation of quality of life and quality of care experience from the perspective of older Australians at the heart of our aged care system. So the programme of work was funded in 2 phases. I'm going to talk firstly about the ARC, the Australian Research Council linkage grant that we were awarded. This was essentially a mixed methods project where we co-designed a new quality of life tool with aged care consumers and also with our aged care partner organisations. You can see their logos across the bottom of the slide there. So we're very fortunate to have 6 aged care partner organisations who partnered with us in this programme of work. So it's essentially 3 phases to this project. The first phase was a series of in-depth semi-structured interviews with older people in both home and residential care settings. And we started essentially with a blank piece of paper. We didn't start with any kind of conceptual framework or anything like that. We started with a blank piece of paper, and we had open conversations with older people about what quality of life means to them. And when they think about what a good quality of life would be, what would be sort of the defining features or characteristics of a good quality of life to older people. We then took all that information, we transcribed it, we analysed it qualitatively using framework analysis, and we came up with key candidate themes for a new quality of life measure. We then took those themes, we did a lot of face validity testing, also through face-to-face interviews, and then we did some more in-depth psychometric testing to assess construct validity, etc., of candidate items to develop our final what we call descriptive system, which is essentially the questions and the response levels attached to each question. And I'll talk in a bit more detail about that in a moment. And then the final phase of the project was to develop what we call a preference weighted scoring algorithm, which again, I'll talk about in a little bit more detail very shortly. And this is really not necessarily so essential for quality assessment purposes, but it's very essential for using the instrument in economic evaluation. We need to have a preference weighted scoring algorithm. And this was developed, again, working with older people across both home and residential care settings. Okay, so in terms of the sort of first phases, the qualitative interviews and the face validity testing, essentially that distilled down to 6 key themes, which really encapsulated what a good quality of life means to older people. And I'm sure these themes will be very familiar to you working with older people in your respective fields. So the first key theme that really became very prominent was the ability to be as independent as possible as we age. The second key theme was really about being as physically mobile as you can be to really do the things that you want to do in your day-to-day activities. The third key theme was emotional well-being. So, not feeling depressed or anxious or sad, but feeling happy and content with your life. The fourth key theme was the ability to maintain social contacts and social connections as we age. So the importance of social connections with family, but also with your wider community. The fifth key theme was about the ability to keep involved in hobbies and activities that you enjoy in the home and also in the community. And the sixth key theme was really about the extent to which pain is well managed. So this was more prominent, it must be said, in the residential care sample than the home care sample, but we did come across it quite frequently also in the home care sample, but certainly in the residential care sample, it was a really salient theme. So, a lot of acceptance amongst older people. And as I'm approaching older age myself, I can really resonate with these thoughts. You sort of have these inevitable aches and pains as you age, but for older people, the most important quality of life defining characteristic about pain was that it's actually well managed, so that any pain that you have is well managed either through non-medical or medical means. Okay, so in terms of the psychometrics, we were very fortunate to have an experienced psychometrician, Dr. Jyoti Kadkar, who's a member of my team, who really led this element of the work. So in terms of the candidate items, we did a lot of face validity testing, and we used what's called a traffic light system. It's a very simple system of green, orange and red, where we talked to older people and we gave them effectively what we call candidate items or candidate questions under each of those key 6 dimensions that I presented previously. So different ways in which we could ask a person about their level of social connections, for example, in this particular example. And then we asked them about their, which question do they think most encapsulates that dimension, which question do they like the best, the reasons why they like particular questions or particular phrases and not. And these question phraseology were all drawn from the initial qualitative interviews where we talked to older people and they talked about their ability to keep social connections as being important, and the phraseology and language that they use, which is obviously really important for content validity and also face validity of any new tool that we had all that in-depth qualitative phraseology and wording it using older people's language. So then we took that from the face validity testing, we then moved on to more what we would call quantitative, in-depth, comprehensive psychometrics. So we use both traditional psychometrics approaches, but also modern rash analysis type psychometrics. So there we're really looking at issues such as the acceptability of the questions that we're testing, targeting. So we're looking at sort of ceiling effects where we, ideally we don't want everybody clustering at the top end of the scale or at the bottom of the scale, so a ceiling or a floor effect in terms of how they would respond. Then other issues including internal consistency, reliability, etc. So these are all sort of key, well-established, recommended psychometric criteria that we really needed our candidate questions to pass to be able to move into the final descriptive system. And what you can see from this slide is that the most preferred way of asking this question relating to social connections was number 2. So I have good social relationships with family and friends, which was preferred from the face validity testing interviews with older people, but also most preferred in terms of its ability to perform psychometrically according to those key psychometric criteria we've identified. Okay, so this is some data which is taken from a sample of just over 300 older people who were receiving home care services in the community. So this includes basic level, entry level Commonwealth Home Support Programme, but also home care package levels 1 to 4. And what we can see here, this is really a slide which I use a lot with my health economist colleagues, because they often think about health status and quality of life as being essentially the same thing. And what I think these two figures side by side show really nicely is actually that health status and quality of life are actually different concepts. And actually within this sample, when we asked older people about their own ratings of the self-reported health versus their self-reported quality of life, you can see that no one actually rated their health as excellent, but quite a number of people rated their quality of life as excellent. And you can see that these two figures are not the same. They are different, which really demonstrates that, and this is again I'm sure you guys are well familiar with this, but you wouldn't believe how many health economists think health status and quality of life are the same thing. It's really demonstrating that there is a difference between these two concepts. Okay, so we also looked at construct validity. So this was a really important element of the psychometric assessment. So once we had our final instrument with our 6 dimensions, with 4 response levels attached to each dimension, ranging from the extent to which that dimension is achieved always relative to not at all. We then compared our new instrument with some established, well-validated instruments that have been applied internationally. So again, you may be familiar with at least some of these tools. So the first one was the ASCOT, which is a measure of social care, quality of life, which was developed in the UK by an academic team in the UK, and it's a generic tool that is utilised across social care. So it's developed for adults of all ages, not necessarily just older people. The EQ5D, which is the world's most widely applied measure of health-related quality of life, it's used with adults of all ages internationally. It's actually mandated by NICE, the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence in the UK, for all submissions for new pharmaceuticals, new healthcare technologies in the UK. We don't have an equivalent mandatory system here in Australia from the PBS and the MBS, the Pharmaceutical Benefits Advisory Committee and the Medical Services Advisory Committee. They're not so prescriptive, but a lot of submissions to those committees would use the EQ5D as a measure of health-related quality of life, again designed for adults of all ages, not older person specific. The QCE, which I'll talk about in a moment, which is our new quality of care experience measure, and the PWI, which is the Personal Wellbeing Index, which again you may be familiar with, which is a more generic measure of wellbeing. So what these sort of correlations effectively show is that overall we have good correlations with the ASCOT, the EQ5D, the QCE and the PWI, but the correlations are not overly high. So they're not indicating that basically tools are interchangeable. It does indicate that the QALAC, our new measure of quality of life, is providing new information that is not available through established validated tools. And the correlations are all in the expected direction. So if a person scores more highly on the ASCOT, the EQ5D, the QCE or the PWI, they do tend to score more highly on the QALAC, which is what we would expect to demonstrate construct validity. But again, the QALAC adds new information that these new tools are not currently providing us with. Okay, so briefly to talk about the sister tool, which is our quality of care experience tool. So this was work that was funded through the Royal Commission, and it adopts a similar approach. Apart from we were more time constrained with this project, unfortunately, a bit of a shoestring budget. So we weren't unfortunately able to conduct the really in-depth qualitative interviews as phase one, but fortunately we were able to conduct a comprehensive international literature review. And there is quite a lot of literature already out there, fortunately, in other countries, but also from Australia, which really identifies and synthesizes what quality of care and good quality of care from the perspective of an older person and family carers in aged care actually means and what it would look like. So we use that information to distill down and develop candidate items for our descriptive system or candidate questions. And then we adopt a similar process to what we adopted for the quality of life work. So we did a lot of face validity testing through interviews with older people. And then we also did the same battery of psychometrics using the traffic light approach to come up with the final descriptive system and the response levels. And we tested the new instrument in both home and residential care settings. And for that work, we partnered with the National Ageing Research Institute in Victoria. And then we developed a preference-based scoring algorithm, which I'm going to talk about in a moment. Okay, so in terms of the construct of our new quality of care experience tool, in some ways it's quite similar to the quality of life tool. And when I say it's quite similar, the structure is quite similar in that we have 6 key dimensions with 4 response levels, ranging from the extent to which these dimensions or items are achieved always down to never. So the extent to which the person is treated with dignity and respect, supported to make their own decisions about the care and services that they receive care and support from aged care staff who have the appropriate skills and training, and that the services and supports that are provided are important for the person's health and well-being. The person is supported to maintain their social relationships and connections with the community, and also that they're comfortable lodging complaints with knowledge that if a complaint is lodged, then appropriate action will be taken. Okay, so this is some data that we collected in collaboration with the National Ageing Research Institute and through work that was funded by the Royal Commission. So this data was collected during the COVID-19 pandemic. Sorry, need to go back. I think I can't see because I've got the meeting now, which is annoying me. I need to get rid of that. Okay, I've got rid of it now. So the top figure is actually data that we collected from a sample of older people nationwide receiving home care services in the community. The bottom figure is data that was collected from a sample of older aged care residents. For the home care sample, you see we had quite a higher proportion of proxies, and these were really family carers of older people who were receiving higher home care package levels, so 3 and 4 with dementia. We have a greater proportion of proxies there. With the residents, there were very few proxies actually, so it was mainly older aged care residents themselves that were surveyed. The residential care sample had to be cut short due to COVID, so the original intention was to collect similar numbers in each cohort, but unfortunately the residential care sample got cut short. But what you can see here, which is quite interesting, is that generally older people reported, most older people reported the quality of care experience was quite good. You can see there is a tail end, which is concerning, of older people who didn't feel that the quality of care they were receiving was particularly good. But also you can see that proxies in general tend to be a little bit more critical than do the person themselves, which is a very well-known factor that we do find quite often in this sort of work across both aged care and health system settings. Proxies can be more critical than the person themselves. We did similar work around construct validity. To what we did with the QALAC, so using different measures. So the CCI-60, which is a measure of essentially care, quality, and also the physical environment in residential care facilities. So we use that instrument. We use the Global Satisfaction of Life Scale, the CASP, which is around control, autonomy, self-realization and pleasure, and also the ASCOT and the Global Satisfaction of Life Scale. And again, you can see sort of similar correlations in that they are positive, they're in the right direction, but it's clear that the QCE is providing new information that's not provided in these established validated tools. This is a quick example, and I'm almost at the end because I realize I'm out of time. So this is a quick example of a preference-based scoring algorithm. So this is, again, some work we did for the Royal Commission, where we surveyed over 10,000 members of the general population with an age range of 18 to 91 years. And we used an approach called a discrete choice experiment, which I've done a lot of work with over my career in various aspects of the health system and in aged care. And using this approach, we can essentially work out how important, or the relative importance, of key dimensions, in this case of the quality of care experience tool, to our general population sample. So we get what's called a preference weighted or preference-based scoring algorithm using this approach. So what you can see from the column heights is essentially that gives us the relative importance of each dimension relative to all other dimensions included in the tool. So you can see that the extent to which the person is treated with respect and dignity was the number one most important quality of care defining characteristic for our general population sample. That was closely followed by the skills and training of the aged care staff providing care and services, and also that services and supports were provided that essentially promoted the person's health and well-being. Okay, so in terms of next steps, well, we've extended the work specifically into CALD populations. So we do include people from CALD populations in the development work, but there weren't an overwhelming proportion, given the resource limitations of needing to talk to people, unfortunately, only in the English language, etc. We just didn't have the money for translations, etc. But we're now doing that work through a Hal Kendig ECR award awarded to Dr. Claire Hutchison in my team. So that's excellent that we're doing some more work there. We've also done some work to look at what we're calling unraveling the proxy self-report conundrum. So the work that I previously showed you about how proxies can be more critical. Can we be more inclusive? Can we develop new methods that will allow older people, particularly those with mild to moderate cognitive impairment and dementia, to be included in their own self-assessments of quality of life and quality of care experience, rather than needing to go to a proxy assessor? So doing that work at the moment. Also more work around construct validity in different samples, and collaborating with digital health partners to produce digital versions of the tool, for completion on smartphones, iPads, etc. And I'm very excited that just this week, actually, I have a new PhD student, Kimmy Lay, who's starting, and she's doing some work to extend the QALAC, the quality of life tool, into the health system setting. We're working with Associate Professor Craig Whitehead and Professor Maria Crotty at Flinders Medical Centre to look at areas where quality of life is really the main focus, and improving quality of life is the main focus for older people. So areas like rehabilitation, transition care, reablement and restorative care. And I'd just like to acknowledge a huge team of people, not just my team at Flinders, but also researchers at the University of Sydney, the Australian National University, University of Newcastle in the UK, and all the funding support which I've previously mentioned, and also our wonderful aged care partner organisations who came with us on this important journey. and some references there if anyone's interested. And the final point, which I think Paul mentioned, which I didn't mention in the slides, is that we're delighted that the Department of Health and Aged Care has now taken up our new tools into the expanded National Quality Indicators Programme for residential care. So aged care providers recently commenced collecting this data as part of that new programme. So we're absolutely thrilled with that outcome. And that was all I had to say. So I'll endeavour to stop sharing my screen, which, as you've already worked out, is not going to be that easy for me because I'm a bit of a technical. I think I've managed.
Fantastic! You've done very well. Thank you, Julie. And while we do have a bit of time for questions and people are thinking of their questions, I'll ask you two. I mean, a fabulous piece of work. Two questions. Firstly, do you think there's, and if so, what sort of relationship between the experience measures and the outcome measures? So you've essentially developed a PREM and a PROM. So what do you expect there is in terms of the relationship between the two at the individual or at the caregiver level? And the second question is, were these measures designed to identify issues in the individual that can then be used for quality improvement, or were they developed for ranking? And are there differences in developing a tool for ranking as opposed to quality improvement? So those two questions to start with.
No, thanks, Paul. So the first question, yes, we have got data on that, and we have looked at that. So the relationship between quality of life and quality of care experience, and generally what we find, not in all cases, but generally what we find is that older people who report better quality of life do tend to also report better quality of care experience. It's not a complete linear relationship by any means, and that's not for everyone. But there is that relationship, at a group level, we do tend to see that there is a correlation, that people who report higher quality of life do also tend to report better quality of care experience. The second question is a really good one. And I think the answer is both, as in with our aged care partners, we've done quite a lot of work where they are now using the tools, especially the quality of life tool, but also quality of care experience tool, effectively in helping them to do their care planning at an individual level. So when a new person comes to them, they're using the QualAC as a way of asking the person in a structured way about how their quality of life is and what areas of their quality of life could be improved. And then they're tailoring their responses. We've developed, with our partners, effectively I don't know what you call it, a map a map of care and services which tap into each individual dimension of the QualAC. So if a person is reporting, for example, that they would really like to improve their social connections, etc., we've worked with our aged care partner organisations to effectively map what sort of services they're currently providing that could then improve that person's quality of life on that particular dimension. And then with the care coordinators, they then work to instigate those. So it's both, really. I think, there's obviously potential, as the Departments of Health would want to do moving forward, potentially to map out at an aggregate level across Australia's aged care system, how many older people are reporting, various levels of quality of life, quality of care experience. But there is also important work going on at the individual level as well.
Thanks for that. I can't see any hands up, but are there any questions that the people who are synchronously participating in this would like to ask? And you may just need to turn your microphone on and ask the question, because, as I say, I can't see everybody's in there. Well, I think you've stunned them, Julie. I think there's probably so many things to think about, and people are also realising the work that they need to go on. But it strikes me, firstly, this has taken 4 years. You know, this is not something that you do just overnight and come up with something that can be utilised nationally and potentially internationally as well. So, you know, well done on sticking in there for that period of time. That takes commitment. But also, what strikes me is that it's a combination of statistics, yes, but conversations as much as the statistics. Which do you think you got most out of in doing the work?
That's an easy question to answer, Paul. The conversations. Yeah, some great memories of conversations, and just fantastic conversations with older people, and we had lots of really positive feedback from the older people that we talked with, and we had people cry on us, but in a good way. It's so nice to have conversations about, no one's really asked me about what quality of life means to me, and what defines a good quality of life. No one's really asked me these questions before. So for sure, for me, it's the conversations that were the best part of the journey. And we were very fortunate to have Kate Swafer, who's excellent, she was a chief investigator on our project. She's a person living with dementia, and I learned so much from her and collaborating with her. So yeah, it was a great experience, and a great outcome at the end. You do this work, and the last thing you want is for, we've written all these papers that go into journals, but you really just want the tools to be used, and so the fact that that's actually happened is the best outcome that we could have hoped for. So we're thrilled. Yeah.
Well, what a wonderful way to finish our grand round today. Thank you, Julie, for inspiring us that health economics is more than just money. It's about people, and it's about stories and that impact and the difference that you can make. And thank you for, in our own backyard, being part of that difference that we hope to make for the older people who are living in our communities. People now know where you live, and I'm sure there'll be plenty of emails and other conversations that will follow this grand round. But thank you, everybody, for participating in this today, and we look forward to creating a better place to grow old. Why not? And why not do it in the Riverland Mallee Coorong? Thank you very much, Julie, and thank you, everybody.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the invitation. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.